We're moving towards this democratization of finance. We're making information more accessible to everyone, which is a very welcome development.
It's a step in the right direction of exploring what a regulatory framework might look like to better rein in the undisclosed partnerships, the aggressive claims with no accountability.
Whenever you consume any type of financial content online, make sure you really take it with a pinch of salt, especially when you talk about beginner investors, really trying to focus on the difference between what is actually investing and what is actually gambling.
Ignacio, Richard, great to see you. Great to be here in Chicago at the CFA Live 25 conference. You're both busy financial professionals. What I want to know is, what motivates you to be content creators? And how do you find the time to do this when you have busy jobs?
Well, to speak for myself, I only post about once every 2 weeks, so it's not as frequent as some content creators might post. And I actually find, so the channel, to answer your question, it lives off of lunch breaks. It's actually a product of what I used to say for the CFA during lunch breaks. And once I finished, I wanted to continue that momentum of, while I'm doing something productive every lunch, let's try and keep working on something. And
so it helps you fulfill that emotional gap having
that's right, yeah.
much free time.
Yeah, that's right. What am I going to do with myself? That's right. No, but I have a real interest in a lot of these finance topics. And I also find working in the industry, there's a lot of topics that come up that I'll be researching for work regardless. And that can easily translate into a discussion or a video. And I really enjoy that aspect of it. I used to have a teaching role. I used to make videos when I was much younger. And so it's kind of a combination of those interests. So it really is kind of a passion project. That's how I try to still treat it these days. Yeah.
That's great. How about you, Ignacio?
So when do I do it? I always give the same answer, which is I don't watch Netflix anymore. Think about all the TV shows.
Yeah, me neither. Now you mention it.
Last week, I spent all that time on social media instead. And the reason why I do it really is because, the same way as the CFA Institute, I think we're trying to advocate for the finance profession. I realized that a lot of my friends, a lot of my connections, even my family didn't really understand what I was doing. And I started posting about some of the topics that were capturing headlines and explain them in words that were simple and really explain things the way I'd like them to be explained to me if I was not working in the finance industry. And long story short, it started to get traction. And along the way, I met a lot of interesting people. I don't think we would be having this conversation today if it was not thanks to social media. So that's why I kept going.
Yeah, that's great. So, it's a fascinating field, and the way in which information is consumed and disseminated in finance is evolving rapidly. And we obviously wanted to understand this issue in greater depth. So, what role do influencers play in you providing recommendations or advice? And what's your sense of the field? Do you see a lot of issues out there, red flags, or are you sort of encouraged by some of the content creators that you see and the information that they provide online? Because it's hard to know, what you should rely on and what not to rely upon. So
I'll let you take that one first.
Yeah. So, there's massive red flags, right? I think you allude to some of those in your fantastic finfluencer report that you co-authored with the CFA Institute. But clearly, I think a lot of creators have hidden agendas and they're not really disclosing the financial interests they have behind their content. So whenever you consume any type of financial content online, make sure you really take it with a pinch of salt. Look at the interest that could be behind any of the posts made by the creators, and really just take it as part of your research process. That's one thing. And I think there's actually a very big need from regulators across the globe to really try to set up the rules, as you mentioned in your report, and level up the playing field so that maybe everyone has the same the same guidelines and understand what is good practice and a bad practice, and so that we harmonize the content that everyone is posting across the globe. But maybe to go back to the initial question, if you're consuming financial content, really pay attention to the details, try to understand why people are posting what they're posting, if there's any financial incentive behind it, and take everything with a pinch of salt.
Yeah, I think just to that point, motivations is key. And this is something that we wrote about in the report, sort of understand what is the person trying to convey? Are they being remunerated for providing that guidance? Are they making the right disclosures? And, when we did the field work for this study, we found that it's a lot of information, a lot of promotional posts don't make disclosures around your third-party remuneration arrangements and affiliate links and so forth. So it's something you have to, do your homework and look out for sure. So I think that's good advice.
Yeah,
So do you see a lot of problems? What's some of the
you do.
things you've seen?
Yeah, you do see it, and what's interesting is there's not only sort of a regulatory gap, but there's also an enforcement gap where even with the rules that do exist, you don't see as much of a crackdown as you would expect, or that maybe there should be. And I'm guessing it's a new space. We don't necessarily have the bodies out there looking for this type of content that might be riding that gray line a little too closely. Well, it was Canadian stocks, but it was actually even among American influencers. There was this, call it an investigation I did. It was in my free time, but it was looking into videos that promoted individual stocks that were so we had actual influencers promoted by publicly traded stocks to share the thesis on it, and some really missing a lot of the important disclosures that you're required by the law to include with some not highlighting. So there's actually laws in British Columbia, Canada, requiring that you disclose the dollar amount that you're paid. So that makes sense as a regulation for securities because it's such a touchy and sensitive topic. But a lot of creators, they have bare minimum disclosures that don't touch on all the necessary information. But I to get back to your first question, I am actually encouraged by the space. It is great to see a lot of people talking about finance and investing. We have more public awareness about the benefits of investing in finance than we did even a few years ago, thanks a lot to social media. And one great point from your report is that roughly a third of Gen Z investors got started with investing or attribute their start to investing to influencers. So I think that's a tremendous first step. It's how do you filter out the more nefarious actions, because while a lot of creators do go into the space to help the people that their viewers and the like, and they have this genuine interest, it's also a very profitable industry. And so that does bring, unfortunately, a lot of different actors who have different motivations, and that can be really problematic when you don't have the safeguards in place.
Yeah, and I think to your point on safeguards, it's an emerging field. Like any sort of new industry, you want to not stifle innovation and creativity, but you've got to set the right guardrails in place so that, the product or the service is provided in a way that's sort of safe and fair to consumers. And, we wrote about this in the report that on balance, we think this is a positive development because it's encouraging participation in the capital markets. It's engaging younger people in thinking about their finances and saving for the future at a much earlier age. So we have to try and encourage that, but making sure that we deal with some of the problematic areas. And regulation is challenging.
Well, that's it.
There's a lot of gray areas.
That's right.
Any international consistency, as you said, Ignacio.
Well, and recently, even Australia, we had an interesting update where they've actually introduced a level of registration for finance influencers. So now in Australia, to speak about general, say, ETFs or mutual funds, there's actually a level of registration required. So I don't know if that's the right approach, but it's a step in the right direction of exploring what a regulatory framework might look like to better rein in the sort of the stuff that can be the most damaging, which is the undisclosed partnerships, the aggressive claims with no accountability, arguing that you'll make someone thousands of percentage of returns, but then tiny little disclosures that say, not financial advice that really, don't do much anyway to stop people from following what the advice is. So it's how do you manage that freedom of information while, again, instituting these safeguards? And I don't have the answer. It's maybe above my pay grade, but it's interesting to see that the approaches and hopefully we get moving in the right direction there.
In Europe, we have also some countries taking the lead, trying to regulate this. France has been pretty proactive, for example. But I guess the issue is that we would need to have all the regulators across the globe to sit down because a lot of this information travels across boundaries, right? And I guess a big question also is whose responsibility it is to, put these guardrails in motion. And I guess at the end of the day, we all have part of our responsibility. There's always, of course, the regulators that have a big role here, but we as creators too and consumers. So at the end of the day, I think everyone has to do his part. But coming back to what you were saying before, I think all in all, what is happening is a positive development. I think We're moving towards this democratization of finance. We're making information more accessible to everyone, which is a very welcome development. In the past, a lot of these tools and information was only available to a very selected few, and now pretty much everyone with an internet connection can learn about markets, about finance, and about investing. And I think it's good. We just need to do it in a responsible way.
Yeah, and out of curiosity, where do you, with the research you found, where do you think the buck falls in terms of instituting these safeguards? Because I remember the report had the different players, so I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
So Ignacio mentioned, there's responsibilities for the content creators. The regulators have a role to play. I think the other important part is the social media platforms themselves, and making sure that it's easy for creators to make disclosures when they have sort of affiliate links, and when they're being remunerated for making certain advertisements on the post. Content moderation is another part of it, and this is a bigger issue, outside of finance, of course, but what role and to what extent should social media platforms be moderating and flagging content that perhaps isn't suitable, particularly when it comes to financial decisions that could be harmful for the consumer. And perhaps, we wrote about this in the report, that AI can, I think, help sort of flag some of the more, let's say, egregious content that is posted online. So it's really that ecosystem of the creators understanding the rules and what's required of them, the social media platforms themselves, to make it easy for disclosures and to flag problematic posts, and then having that sort of regulatory consistency. And you say Europe is trying to take a lead in this area. I know IOSCO's been looking at this, and you've been having some discussions as well with the authorities in the US that are certainly interested in this topic too. So it's an evolving area, but generally a positive development, and I think one that, again, the industry has to engage with, because this is the direction of travel.
Yeah.
I think one other group that we haven't really discussed is financial firms themselves. So where they are actually thinking about using content creators as almost like a distribution channel to talk about their products and promote them. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you know how widespread this is, where, let's say, a bank, an asset manager, a broker, maybe more in the case of an investment platform, is using or partnering with content creators to sort of promote and distribute their products? Is that something that you come across a lot?
Oh yeah, I would say so. I especially back in 2021, when we had sort of this surge of retail interest, affiliate links for platforms like Robinhood and FTX, may rest in peace, I guess, where you had these trading platforms that would pay creators a certain fee for every sign up they got. And so that was a big source of income for a lot of finance creators. And these are the more, well, not in FTX's case, because that ended up losing people a lot of money. But there's sort of a mix. You have some that are less harmful. Maybe they encourage more trading and the like, which is not necessarily in people's best interest. If you're a casual investor or someone who's starting off, and I think that's one issue I find a lot, is encouraging beginners to stock pick and pick cryptos and the like. Like, really, if you don't have a passion for that sort of research, I don't think most people should be doing that type of work, because it's an art, and it takes time and experience and dedication. And a lot of people, they just want the money aspect. They don't look for those factors. And it's, so you have the more, but you have regulated financial platforms, and then you have, and I think there's more of a movement towards doing it more responsibly, but you do have some firms who are more aggressive with it. And again, I mentioned those individual stocks that again, mostly Canadian mining companies, funny enough, but they're slowly starting to see more accountability for the type of marketing they do. And there's actually been a few cases of regulatory action against some of these stocks for not publicly disclosing that they were in fact paying influencers to help market their position, and generally more requirements coming of these companies. So I think you're right. I think there's also this almost fourth player, which is the companies and the services themselves that are sponsoring the content, that eventually they need to be more responsible for the messaging and how they teach creators to promote their services.
And I think also, now that we are in the age of AI, and I'm hearing a lot of people talk about hyper-personalization during this conference. You were talking about retail investors and the different degrees of knowledge. I think there's also going to be a lot of things happening in terms of the kind of information that you share with different types of audiences. And especially when you talk about beginner investors, really trying to focus on the difference between what is actually investing and what is actually gambling. We've seen a lot of headlines around that topic as of late. Some investing platforms offering the option to their users to engage in some sort of gambling opportunities.
That's right, yeah.
Exactly. In line of gamification, which again, I'm actually pretty in favor of gamification as long as we don't cross that line, right? And as long as we differentiate between investing and gambling. But I'm okay with adding a little bit of color, a bit of confetti, if that,
If
helps.
it incentivizes good action.
Exactly.
Yeah, I suppose.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
it's as you say, incentivizing good actions, encouraging behavior, but you've provided this enough friction in the system to not encourage you to do too much of something.
That's right.
We all know from studying finance that, too much trading can be harmful. There's a cost to that. So, that could be a drag on your returns. And so, we have to get the right balance with all of these issues.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, this has been a great discussion. Social media is here to stay. Retailization of finance is something that we've heard throughout the conference remarks as well. So it's an area we're going to keep track of in the Research and Policy Center. There's more work to do, and we look forward to continuing talking with you both and learning more as you continue to post really valuable content.